August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe dies in her Brentwood home. Official cause: barbiturate overdose. Yet, 50 years later, 62% of Americans remain convinced she was murdered by an agent of Robert F. Kennedy. But in 2006, the FBI declassifies 1,200 pages of File 105 to 10,381. The result: no mention of a federal agent. The only agent cited is a private chauffeur. So, where does this popular certainty come from? What if the myth is based on a simple transcription error? Marilyn Monroe, the world's most famous actress, was having a discreet relationship with Robert F. Kennedy, the brother of the President and the U.S. Attorney General. On August 4, 1962, RFK visits her in Brentwood, accompanied by his lawyer Milton Rudin and his chauffeur Bill Carter, a former policeman. The next day, at 3:30 a.m., Dr. Hyman Engelberg finds Monroe unresponsive. Sergeant Jack Clemens arrives at 4:25 a.m. The coroner, Thomas Nogu, concludes on August 17, 1962, that it was an acute barbiturate poisoning, for 0.5 mg of nembutal in the blood, 8 mg of seconal in the liver. No signs of violence. For 20 years, the accident theory dominates. But in 1975, a book changes everything. The Killing of Marilyn Monroe by Robert Slatzer claims that RFK sent a Secret Service agent to silence her. The public is inflamed. The tabloids relay the story. However, in 1982, prosecutor John Minor publishes a reinvestigation report. No material, medical, or testimonial evidence supports this version. And in 2006, the FBI puts its Monroe file online, without any trace of a federal killer. But why does this story still hold? This is what we've been asked to accept. On August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe dies from an accidental barbiturate overdose. Coroner Thomas Nogu affirms it: no murder, no conspiracy. The FBI, through its File 105 to 10,381, confirms no involvement of Robert Kennedy or an agent. In 1982, prosecutor John Minor doubles down: no material, medical, or testimonial evidence supports the theory of a murder. The case is closed. Except that Jack Clemens, the first officer on the scene, tells a different story. And Robert Slatzer, the author of the 1975 book, claims to have been married to Monroe, which her close ones deny. The official version is clear, almost too clear. Not a shadow, not a doubt. But if it's so solid, why do so many people continue to look for another truth? The government claims no Secret Service agent was sent to Marilyn Monroe's home. But Robert Slatzer writes in 1975 the opposite: RFK commissioned a killer. The FBI File 105 to 10,381, declassified in 2006, only mentions a private chauffeur, Bill Carter. No federal agent. The reinvestigation report by John Minor, 1982, dismisses all assassination accusations. Dr. Michael Baden, a forensic expert, confirms in 1993 not the slightest trace of a third party. So, why does the public remain convinced that Kennedy ordered Monroe's death? Let's take the star witness, Jack Clemens. In 1968, he tells Playboy he saw a man with an official look leaving the scene. But he only formally identifies him as an RFK agent in 1975, the exact year the Slatzer book comes out. Coincidence? Experts find it suspicious. Especially since Clemens had already changed his story several times in front of the police. Then, there's the agent Bill Carter. In the FBI archives, he's labeled as a security agent by RFK's office. Just an administrative label. But the 1970s tabloids translated it as federal agent. A transcription error that turns a private chauffeur into a government killer. So, Let's ask the disturbing question: if the medical and forensic evidence is so clear, why does this myth refuse to die? And what other cases have been distorted by a simple misunderstanding of words? The evidence isn't about words. It's a stack of documents, dates, and signatures that form a wall. The coroner's report is the first wall. On August 17, 1962, Dr. Thomas Nogu publishes his analysis. For 0.5 milligrams of nembutal in the blood, 8 milligrams of seconal in the liver. A fatal dose. No signs of violence, no injection marks, nothing indicating a third party. The official conclusion: acute barbiturate poisoning. The second wall is prosecutor John Minor, tasked in 1982 with re-examining the case amid rumors. He interviews 40 witnesses, analyzes the 1,200 pages of the original file. His conclusion, published on December 16, 1982, is categorical: no material, medical, or testimonial evidence supports the theory of a murder or the involvement of an RFK agent. The third wall is the FBI. In 2006, the agency declassifies file 105 to 10,381. We look for the mention of an agent. We find Bill Carter. But the footnote, often omitted by tabloids, specifies Bill Carter is a private chauffeur, a former policeman employed by RFK's law firm. Not a federal agent. The fourth wall is the medical archives. In 2008, the notebooks of psychiatrist Ralph Green's son are made public. A month before her death, Marilyn Monroe confides in him, "I'm taking too many sleeping pills. I'm afraid of losing control." The fifth wall is independent expertise. In 1993, Dr. Michael Baden, one of America's top forensic experts, tells the New York Times there's not the slightest trace of a third party involved. The sixth wall is the National Archives, which on January 3, 2019, declassifies 144 additional pages. Nothing. Not a single line about a killer. Only the confirmation that Carter was indeed a private employee. 6 walls. No cracks. But this wall was never built in the public's mind. Why? Because the public has learned not to trust official versions. And for good reason. COINTELPRO proved the FBI spied on Martin Luther King. Operation Mockingbird proved the CIA infiltrated newsrooms. So, why would they suddenly trust the government on the death of a star? The revelation here isn't that the government lied. It's the opposite. The problem is that the government told the truth. And this truth is less satisfying than a good conspiracy theory. The myth of RFK's assassination fills an emotional void. It transforms a mundane death, an accidental overdose, common in Hollywood, into a grand political drama. It allows us to hate a power rather than mourn a fragile woman who took too many sleeping pills. Robert Slatzer, the author of the thesis, had no documents. He had a narrative that fit the mood of the time. The nation was coming out of Watergate. Distrust of institutions was at its peak. Offering a story where the government killed its mistresses was politically profitable. The thesis of Monroe's assassination isn't a judicial error. It's a transfer of distrust. Slatzer didn't discover the truth. He profited from a cultural momentum where everything was permitted against power. So, who really orchestrated this disinformation campaign? Slatzer, the tabloids, or the public's simple refusal to accept a stupid death? It's the same mechanism that fuels doubts about other classified cases. When the institution has already lied, the myth becomes stronger than the document. In 2022, the Netflix series *Blonde* brings the myth back to the forefront. Without any counter-investigation. Without citing archives. The public thinks it's seeing the truth. It's only seeing the legend. The 2024 archives, awaited by enthusiasts, will change nothing. Experts say there's nothing new to find. The Monroe case has been medically and legally closed since 1962. But the myth is stronger than the document. Why? Because documents are cold. The myth is burning. It tells a story that millions of people need to hear, that power kills in silence. Today, the story of Monroe has become a parable. That of a woman destroyed by a corrupt system. The evidence doesn't matter. What counts is the symbol. And as long as the system remains suspect, any story, even without foundation, will seem more true than reality. So, did Robert Kennedy assassinate Marilyn Monroe? No. The facts say so. The archives prove it. The experts confirm it. But this answer isn't satisfying. Because the question was never about whether RFK was guilty. The question is why we desperately need to believe it. Marilyn Monroe's death doesn't hide a killer. It hides our own refusal to accept a world where tragedies are sometimes just accidents. The archives are clear. The myth is alive. No declassification can ever bury a story that everyone wants to tell. This isn't the first time a misinterpreted word rewrote history. What happens when we translate an archive? We soon talk about it.